Spiritual awakening is typically pictured as a grand entrance, a trumpet blast, or a discovery that is yelled from the rooftops. In actuality, however, the awakened frequently vanish. They cease demanding attention. While others vie for attention, they give up the mad games of ambition. They disappear into the distance. And the dilemma is this: more is said about them while they are not there than when they are. They reveal something that the rest of us have forgotten when they vanish. Remembering who you are when no one else is looking is more important in life than trying to prove yourself to the masses. The folks who are drowning us in opinions and ads aren't the most alive or alert. They are the ones quietly moving aside, as though the cacophony of civilization no longer appeals to them. And it's odd when you see it. We anticipate that wisdom will be loud, theatrical, and self-assured. However, when someone is genuinely awake, they don't feel the need to beg. They grin at the world's performance. They make a silent bow and leave the stage in freedom rather than defeat or resentment. Silently, almost imperceptibly. Why do people act in this way? Because realizing that the game itself is optional is the first step toward awakening. People are running, grabbing, and competing all around you. They gauge success by speed, noise level, and the number of onlookers. The enlightened, however, realize that none of this is really important. The medals vanish when you wake up, and the grand race is a dream. So why continue running? Why do you keep yelling? You can't play with the same seriousness once you see through the deception. Those who are spiritually aware are not running from life. They're running away from unreality, and they disappear in the process. However, their disappearance is not a lack of presence. It's a different kind of presence. They're no longer required to prove themselves. They don't have to use titles and prizes to adorn themselves. Additionally, they lose their desire for attention, making them unnoticeable to the general public. When society observes them, it asks, where did they go? They are more alive than ever, nevertheless, in their silence. They found something that society doesn't notice. That the greatest happiness comes from just existing, not from being noticed. Thus, they vanish, not into emptiness, but into an unquantifiable freedom. Consider La Sue, who disappeared into the mountains, leaving only a little book in her wake. He didn't run for office. He didn't yell. He turned to leave. Nevertheless, his silence has reverberated for millennia. Or consider the mystics, poets, and sages. They hardly ever try to rule. They retreat more frequently. They understand that the truth cannot be coerced. You can't force someone to wake up. A flower cannot be forced to open. All you can do is live out what you have witnessed and allow those who are prepared to approach. Thus, the enlightened proceed in silence, relying on life to instruct them. Although it appears to be rejection from the outside, it is not. The release has occurred. They no longer have to agree with every debate, every fad, and every contest. They might still take part, but only in a light-hearted way, as if they were playing a game they no longer confuse with reality. They are quiet because of this. They're not vacant. They are completely occupied, filled with the quiet that hums beneath all sounds. You can sense it when you sit with them. Their silence is an act of presence rather than avoidance. They have a richer beat in tune. Through constant talking and hurrying, society has drowned out a rhythm. Stimulation, advertising, gossip, and a never-ending sense of urgency are what makes society thrive. However, the stimulation loses its appeal when you taste silence and catch a glimpse of the calm beneath. What was urgent now seems insignificant. What used to seem essential now seems like a diversion. This explains why awakened individuals become silent. They're not disinterested or bored. They're just happy. They don't have to follow every echo anymore. Beneath the commotion, they have heard the music, and it is sufficient. They learn in solitude that they are not alone or isolated. They are the universe's very movement, conscious of itself. Even when they go, they leave a lasting impression. Their absence communicates, their presence lingers. Although they might not recall what someone said, people do recall the sensation of being close to them. Safe, alive, and calm. Spiritually awake people have an impact by gravity rather than volume. Others are drawn to their calm effortlessly. Imagine a nighttime fire. It doesn't promote itself. However, warmth is enticing, so everyone congregates nearby. The same is true for people who vanish. They're still there. They have just ceased their yelling, and they are more radiant than ever in their quiet. The general public is unsure of how to see them. Occasionally, it makes fun of them by labeling them misfits, dropouts, and dreamers. At times, it romanticizes them by depicting them as enigmatic saints. However, because society is based on momentum and maintaining the game, it rarely understands. The entire theater trembles if too many people discover that the game is optional. Because of this, those who are fully awake like to live in silence and away from the spotlight. By their very presence, they disrupt the pattern. They don't have to preach at all. Their approach to solitude is a quiet revolution that detracts from the play's gravity. But don't assume they're worthless. They may be deemed impractical by society, yet without them, chaos would reign. We are reminded that life is about more than just production and consumption by the poets, mystics, and wanderers. Like a tree's roots, they are invisible and concealed but support everything above. Their disappearance signifies balance rather than absence. They anchor us by remaining motionless while the mob surges forward mindlessly. And sometimes we feel them even when we can't see them. A reminder in the quiet, a slight change in the atmosphere. You may also move aside. Did you sense it? That subtle internal pull that tells you to slow down and to blend in with the background noise. You're worn out from performing all the time. Even when you feel that chasing is pointless, you hesitate since it seems risky to vanish. If you leave the race, you run the danger of being misinterpreted or even turned away. What if, however, rejection is freedom? What if power comes from being invisible? Those that are spiritually aware are aware of this secret. They opt for simplicity over spectacle and genuineness over recognition. They vanish. Indeed. However, they rediscover themselves in the process. They exchange the crowd's cheers for the embrace of quiet. They're not alone in that quiet. They're still alive. Because isolation is the root cause of loneliness. Silence, however, implies connectedness. The sky, the rivers, and the trees all talk quietly. They don't scream. They still sing, though. When the woke hear this melody, they know it's sufficient. Thus, they mix in and go unnoticed as they merge into everyday life. You never know when you might run into them on the street. But there's something odd about them. There's a peace in their eyes. They do not move in a hurry. They also serve as a silent reminder of something you've long forgotten. Your own existence. Their disappearance is not tragic because of this. It's educational. It demonstrates an alternative. We frequently believe that significance comes from being well-known, significant, and remembered. However, the reverse is shown by the awakened. Being genuine, even if invisible, is what gives things meaning. Your resume doesn't matter to life. Your awareness is important to life. And those who vanish have opted for awareness rather than praise. By doing this, they demonstrate that disappearance does not equate to loss. It's freedom. Under the layers of noise, there's a return to what was always present. A return to life's basic necessities. For you, what does this mean? Maybe it means allowing yourself to occasionally step back, to stop proving yourself, to leave the never-ending performance. Perhaps it entails learning to like your own company, to not be afraid of the stillness, but to listen to it. You may be labeled unusual by society, but keep in mind that what society labels as useless, life may label as intelligent. Because obscurity is a common camouflage for wisdom, those that vanish are not failures. They serve as reminders. They serve as a reminder that we are not required to continue running, that there is joy in simplicity, freedom in silence, and beauty in silence. But do not make disappearance into a show. Avoid disappearing merely to seem enigmatic. That is ego in disguise. It is not dramatic to truly vanish. Like the sunset, it is gentle, organic, unexpected, and disappears without warning. And the stars emerge in their silent departure. Similarly, as the enlightened retreat, They create room for others to shine. They merely permit rather than control or demand. Therefore, the truth is that they have not disappeared when society asks where they have gone. Though on a different frequency, they are still present. Though they are not of the world, they are in it. And, when you meet one, it's not because of what they say, but rather because of how you feel around them. You let your guard down. Your thoughts become sluggish. Without words, you feel seen. Their talent is that. They're not missing. No one is more present than them. However, they are silent rather than noisy. Not in performance, but in being. And for that reason, they appear to be invisible. Then, it is not an issue if enlightened individuals vanish. It's a sign, an indication that some people have not forgotten the reality. They have kept in mind that life is not a competition, a race, or a stage for never-ending rivalry. Now, life is there and developing with each breath, and you no longer feel the urge to perform after you witness this. You might still play parts, but not very much. You can still talk, but in a quiet voice. Life is no longer in your grasp. With it, you dance. Additionally, at times, the dance requires you to move back into the shadows, where the moves are more fluid and the music is more audible. Maybe you too experience the want to vanish, but it's out of love rather than despair. To value presence over praise, to value truth over acknowledgement, and to value quiet over noise. This isn't an escape. Arrival has arrived into the real world, into the freedom that society is unable to provide, into the dirt beneath the show. Because the illusion of endless driving is essential to society as a whole. This is no longer necessary for the awakened. The hunt is no longer necessary for them. They've recalled that the purpose of life is to notice, not to be noticed. To be, not to perform. Then they disappear. Some into the natural world, some into everyday life, and still others into plain obscurity. Their disappearance, however, is not empty. It's fullness. It is the fullness of someone who has lost their ability to grasp. And even though they are invisible, they glow in that totality. Their names may never be familiar to you. You might never read what they have to say. However, their presence subtly and imperceptibly changes the world. They support more than they seem, much like the tree's roots nourish it. They are the secret harmony, the invisible equilibrium. To matter, you don't have to be visible. Being loud is not a prerequisite for having power. To live a meaningful life, you don't have to be remembered. This does not imply giving up on life. It does not imply cave-dwelling or complete rejection of the outside world. Destroying is not the same as disappearing. It is change. You continue to laugh, love, and live. You no longer care about appearances, though. Reality is what you live for, and the truth is straightforward, modest, and silent. It is not worthy of praise. It doesn't require acknowledgement. It just is. Living in accordance with this reality means vanishing into the delusions of society and resurfacing in the truth of existence. It isn't a getaway. Homecoming is coming up, and your own heart will sense the difference, even if society doesn't. Thus, we shouldn't be alarmed by this disappearance. Let's celebrate it. Let's pay tribute to those who choose to ignore the commotion, because they provide us with a path that we can follow. They serve as a reminder that life is more than just climbing ladders and getting praise, and that it is possible to live differently. They serve as a reminder of our inner stillness. And we too could find freedom if we have the courage to pursue that stillness. Not the freedom to behave as you like, but the more profound freedom to be yourself and to stop having to pretend. We are vanishing now in our own little ways. Every time we decide that presence is more important than performance, every time we choose silence over noise, and every time we recall that being is more important than seeming, we escape the delusions of society and awaken to the reality of existence. The true revolution is that. Stepping into the dance means stepping out of the character. Quieter means you can hear the song better. Maybe you will too vanish one day, not into nothingness, but into everything, into the uncomplicated, limitless presence of what is. You'll realize then that you haven't truly left the world. You've come at last.